Hello everyone. So a while ago someone asked me if we could do a map of Denmark, and I said, well, that's a good idea, let's do that. And I don't speak any Danish, but I figured I'd just do it like when I did the map on Sweden or the Benelux states. I don't speak Swedish or Dutch either, but looking up some pronunciation rules and listening to some audio samples, I figured this is going to be okay. And we're still going to do this map of Denmark, but I just want to apologize up front. The Danish language has defeated me, and I'm not going to try and pronounce most of the names on this map because I feel like it's just going to turn out wrong. So I'm sorry about that. It's really quite a fascinating way that the language is pronounced, and I tried my best, but I feel like I'm not getting far with it. So, that being said up front, if you are Danish, please forgive me for what I'm about to do. And if you're not Danish, please don't look to my pronunciation for the proper way to do it. So, that being said, let's have a look at what we can see here. We have quite a large map of Denmark. In fact, here we're only seeing the southern area. It extends further north here, which we're going to have a look at in a moment. But sort of just to orient ourselves, we have Germany here in the south. We have the North Sea on our left-hand side. And here past these islands we have Sweden and the Baltic Sea. And before we take a closer look at this area, which is quite interesting, we're going to flip the map over and have a look at the other side. Alright, so you can tell the other side of the map's a bit smaller. We have Aarhus here, I hope this is somewhat correct, which we also had on the other side of the map. Again, we have the North Sea, which is Vesterhavet, so the Western Sea. You have the translation here. And then from the North Sea, we're moving here into the Skagerrak. To the north, we would have Norway and the Oslo Fjord. And then down here on this side, we're getting into the Kattegat. We have a smaller map here. So we can see Germany. This part would be called Jutland. Then we have the island Fyn and Sjælland. Before we get to Sweden on this side. Kattegat is a bit of a funny name for this body of water here. katte does mean, or it looks like it does mean cat. And gate, I think, is basically a street. It looks like the Norwegian word for street too, which would be gate if I remember correctly. Basically what this refers to is that it is quite a narrow way, so it's difficult to get through. You have to be like a cat to make your way through. And I thought that was a really funny explanation for the name. It's quite a busy area of water, a lot of fishing happening, plenty of ships going through, but historically it was also quite difficult. Today we can also see here we have a wind farm off the coast. And when we go back to the other side, we'll also see that in the North Sea. So the northern tip of Jutland is quite interesting. We can follow the road here along the coastline. Let's see, where do we want to go? All the way north. And you can see here that we have to cross the water on this side and get to the Limfjord. And this body of water extends all the way through the island. Again, we have a couple of connections, a couple of bridges across it. But you can see here that we can make our way further north. Past another bridge right here. The Akersund. Past Aalborg. And into the Langerak. And then are coming out in the Kattegat. So technically the northernmost part is already disconnected from the main part of Denmark. It would already be an island, but from what I understand it's not considered to be an island, even though the water's made its way. If we look at the names of the cities, we have here Frederikshavn. I'm not sure about the Danish, but it looks a lot like a German word basically. And the haven at the end would mean harbor or port. Here we have a by at the end, which means a city in most Scandinavian languages. And Denmark, of course, has a very close connection and close history with the other Scandinavian nations. Let's jump back to the other side to take a closer look at that. So we were just north here. But let's come over here for a moment to the capital of Copenhagen. we can see the border to Sweden going through the Öresund. Again, very busy here, with a lot of ferries going back and forth. We also have this famous bridge crossing over into Malmö, into Sweden. And all things considered, it does seem a bit funny that the capital of Denmark would be all the way at the border. But of course, historically, the border did not run through the Öresund, but was further into Sweden. I mentioned this when we talked about the map of Sweden, that parts of southern Sweden were Danish for a long time. So some of the pronunciations in southern Sweden are a little different too, especially when it comes to city and place names. These are often a little more conservative when it comes to sound changes. The history that connects Denmark to Sweden and Norway goes back to the Middle Ages. In 1397, the three states entered into a personal union under Queen Margaret I, and they were supposed to be equal partners, but it seemed like Denmark wanted to be a bit more equal, and there was some friction, especially with Sweden, which eventually broke away, and which led to quite a long time of friction between these two states. Norway, however, stayed with Denmark, and Norway at the time also ruled over the Faroe Islands and Greenland. I already mentioned when we looked at the changes under Napoleon that Norway then came to Sweden. However, the Faroe Islands and Greenland stayed with Denmark. Interestingly though, while Denmark today is a member of the EU, the Faroe Islands and Greenland are not, so they are quite autonomous. Denmark also voted not to adopt the euro, but to keep its own currency. But other than that, of course, it's quite closely connected, and it was one of the early membership states of the European Union. Here we can also see that we have a connection to Germany. This is a bit that we have skipped over for now. It's the only land border that Denmark has. And historically this was a bit of a contested land border. We can see today that it runs through here, so just north of Sylt, which is this island here, part of Germany. I had the pleasure of visiting Sylt a couple of years ago, and it was the first time I heard Frisian. You can see that these are the northern Frisian islands. And I was very surprised at the time because my experience as someone who speaks a southern German dialect is that I can usually understand people in the north quite well, but they can't always understand me. And when I heard Frisian, that completely changed, and I I couldn't understand anything. So my perception of the world kind of turned a little bit. Alright, so here we have this land border to Paderborn and then Flensburg. Here one of the larger cities right by the border, and Glücksburg, which means basically lucky city. Burg would be a castle or a fortress, but you can find it in quite a lot of city names. A little further south, here we have Schleswig, Husum, Kiel. This is another large city in the north. And interestingly, the border also shifted over time, and it wasn't always clear where to draw it. There was a time when Denmark would have liked to see it a little further south. Other people would have preferred it further north, of course. But basically what this border has led to is that there's a Danish-speaking minority here in the north of Germany and a German-speaking minority here in Denmark. So a lot of shared history. And of course, if we're thinking back to the Middle Ages, we have quite a strong Low German influence here in the north from the Hanseatic state, which is something that's also been requested and something we're going to have a look at eventually. So here this island is Fyn with Odense right at the center. And of course we can go back towards Jutland and Copenhagen. But we can also take a little trip south. Svendborg. And again we have a bridge to Langeland, which I assume translates to long land or a long island. At least that's what I'm guessing. So let's see what these blue lines are here. They're right up here. There would be a connection by ship or by ferry. So we can go from Langeland to Lolland. We arrive right here. And the green border indicates a national park. We have a museum right next to it, Sukker Museum. If I'm reading it right, it's a sugar museum. But maybe it means something else in Danish. Here we have a Maribor with some little lakes right here. From there we can turn north, again across the bridge, and another one here past Farø, and we're back on the way to Copenhagen, all the way north. But we could also have a look south. Let's see what we have here. Another wind farm. This here looks like 2 lighthouses. Let's see if that's correct. Here it says it's some tower, it can be a lighthouse, but it might also be a radio tower, I think. But of course, if you're traveling through Denmark, then these here are probably more important. Can go camping right by the sea and swimming in the Baltic Sea. Can here and here we have another protected park right here where you're allowed to go swimming. There's a beach, quite a lot of beaches along the way. Another one here, an art museum, another park, and then here you can see that the settlement's quite dense. It's not just the capital city, but it extends outwards with one place after the other. Roskilde is how I learned to say it. I'm not sure that's right. Quite a well-known place because of a festival that I think used to be here. I'm not sure it still takes place. Back when I was younger, I would watch that on some of the music channels. Alright, and then up here, along the Öresund, we also have one place after the other. From Helsingør, you can cross by ferry to Helsingborg in Sweden. So also quite similar names. Okay, let's look at some more of these connections because I think that's quite fascinating. We can also start from Germany and use the Kielafjord all the way to Norway, to Oslo, through the Langelandsbelt, north here. Again, we have some towers along the way. The Storebelt, so the large belt, Samsobelt, and then we disappear into the north. We can cross from Sjælland to Jutland. Past Hjelmdub. I think a famous author might have borrowed that name for his book. Here we have a smaller island. Again with some camping options. 1, 2, 3 beaches. And some more smaller islands in between. I'm always really fascinated by these kinds of landscapes because it looks very different from anything I'm familiar with. So when we had to stay home the last 2 years, I sometimes went to the Danube to watch the ships go by, which is something I never really used to do before. But I developed a bit of a fascination with that. So I think this would be really exciting for me. Just to see all of these ferries crossing. But we wanted to have a look at this side here too. Like I said, we have a couple of wind farms. There's the Vesterhaven Syd, which in fact does not exist yet. It's going to be built this year and next year, presumably, so this was quite a new card. But we have 3 here, Havmøllepark 1, 2 and 3. I imagine the North Sea is a little cold, but nonetheless there's one beach after the other. I'm used to some very warm lakes here in Austria, so I guess it might be a little too cold for me, but I'm sure you get used to it. When I was at Sylt, I couldn't really try it out since we were in winter. But it was really, really beautiful here. I think we were in Vesterland. And when we left, we took the train across the Hindenburg Dam. And I don't quite remember where exactly we went. Oh, maybe here. Then south past Breitstedt and Husum. Then eventually back home. So, a beautiful country with a very difficult language. Even though I can understand some of it when it's written down, the pronunciation got the best of me. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again next week. Good night.